Welcome to Second Take, the show that focuses on the issues behind the news. South Africa took a major step forward this week in its bid to begin integrating renewable energy into its coal-heavy power mix. Terence Creamer joins me to discuss the latest milestone. Terence, welcome to Second Take. Energy Minister Depo Peters unveiled the first batch of preferred bidders. Can you remind us how we got to this point?
Yes, a few months ago there was a lot of unhappiness and anxiety around our process to procure the first renewable energy projects, because we had abandoned the refit tariffs, which were seen as world-class and best practice around the world, in favour of a competitive bidding process. Now we had to do that because our laws that govern government procurement, so that government can't procure in any other way. They need to have some sort of competitive bidding process. So the feed-in tariff was therefore set aside in favour of what became known as rebid. And rebid initially there was a lot of unhappiness and uncertainty around how it would unfold. But I think what emerged is a world-class tender process, one that we haven't really seen, I think, in any other sector of South African society for the procurement of a large-scale or anything, in fact, whether it was buses or whether it's trains or anything like that. I think we've seen a very professional, very well-managed bidding process, which was really led by the Department of Energy as well as the National Treasury, and crucially, I think, a team of very professional transaction advisors, whether these were lawyers or financial people or engineers. They really came together and we ran a very good process to procure 3,725 megawatts. So what's happened is that the bids opened with the first window on November the 4th, and they're going to be there's another 4 at least planned bid windows to procure all that capacity, because they realized that the hurdles were quite high. So it wasn't just about the price, it was also about the local spin-offs for South Africa that could be generated from the procurement of these power stations. And this has included black economic empowerment, localization as much as possible of the content that's going into these power plants, as well as a number of training and technology transfer spin-offs. So that the hurdles were high, so they realized there were going to have to be a number of windows. So the first window closed on the 4th of November, and 58 bids were received at that point. Also, people had to pay bid bonds of 100,000 Rand per megawatt bid. So it was significant. You had to be fairly serious to participate. And I don't think all those that bid on the 4th of November actually paid those bid bonds. So a number of those were immediately discounted. But what we heard this week was that the first 28 preferred bidders were listed by Minister Peters down at COP17. And this has caused a lot of excitement. So we see that there's wind and solar that dominate the first round, with solar photovoltaic being the dominant technology. 18 of the 28 bids are in that category. Then there's 2 that are concentrated solar power projects, and the balance are wind power projects. And these are across just about every province in the country, barring KwaZulu-Natal and Mpumalanga.
Now that we have the preferred bidders, what are the next steps?
Yeah, there's still some way to go before we see shovels in the ground. I think the good thing is, because of all the delays and everything, I think a lot of these projects were quite advanced. A lot of them already have sort of pilot sites up, especially the photovoltaic guys. And we also know that a lot of these can be built quite rapidly, again, especially the photovoltaic plants. We saw ahead of COP17, people thought there would be no COP17 renewable energy projects, but a number of rooftop solar photovoltaic projects were developed in time for COP. So you can see the rollout is can be fast-tracked around some of these technologies. So the next step is really to take this to financial closure. And again, because of the delays and because this process has taken quite a few years to get to this point, a lot of that work has actually happened. So when the wind farms, the big wind farms and some of the solar projects were announced as preferred bidders, a lot of those projects have their technology in place. They have their connection agreements with Eskom. They have what they think their price is, and those are obviously something that will now be discussed between them and the single buyer to get a power purchase agreement. So I think that financial close for a lot of these 28 projects is quite certain. And therefore, by middle of next year, we should start seeing the first projects actually being announced as having reached financial close, and the shovels going into the ground, and these wind farms and these solar parks going up in earnest. But there's always a slip between cup and lip, and we could have some of these 28 not going through and not actually getting into a productive phase. But I think there's every intention to put renewable energy on a sound footing. So I think these are serious projects, and I think we're going to see quite a lot of progress over the next few months.
South Africa is also looking to deal with the potential for renewables to add to an already steeply rising power price path. What is the thinking in this regard?
This is a crucial part of the program. South Africa has had very low power tariffs for many years, but we're in a process of building new capacity, and we've seen massive tariff hikes coming through. And there's a report that came out this week that showed that just on electricity, our administered price over the last 10 years have risen by 171%, where other BRIC nations have actually been able to sustain or contain their price hikes or even reduce their price hikes in electricity over the same period. So that's changing the cost structure of South African economy. It's making it much harder for businesses to be competitive. Now, if you add these unconventional or new energy sources into the mix, there's going to be an incremental cost. And in fact, President Zuma put a price to that. The incremental cost, he said, is going to be $660 million a year over the rollout of the full 17,800 megawatts of renewable energy. So it's a significant additional cost that we probably wouldn't have had to bear if we were going to be building these as conventional power plants. In South Africa's case, that would be coal. But we know that there's pressure on coal, and we know it's going to be harder to fund coal projects. Coal will remain a key part of the mix, but South Africa has, totally bought into the climate change, the fact that we have to take some responsibility for climate change, and we have to start adapting our mix. And this is a very bold decision for a coal-heavy country like South Africa, especially where it's cheap and abundant. But it's part of a decision that we're in an integrated world, that we don't have to only contribute our part to climate change, but also there's a threat to our products and services. If we're coming from a production base that's very coal-heavy and carbon-intensive, there could be barriers at some point to those products. So that's not an immediate threat, but it's a threat that people are seeing over the medium term. And because these power projects have got such long lives, you actually have to start taking action now. So it's a decision, and it's got a price to it, and or cost to it. And what is now, there's some serious effort going in from the South African authorities to try and look at ways of dealing with those incremental costs. Because when you put in renewable energy, it's a variable production. You have to have a reserve margin spinning in the background, just in case that wind stops blowing. We know that the sun's going to go down. So we do have to have that backup capacity. So when you're building, say, for instance, as we are, these initial projects are 1,400 megawatts of the initial ones that have gone through the preferred bidder phase. You almost have to have a backup plan for that, coming from probably conventional gas or nuclear or coal resources. So there is this cost to it. And in fact, I think we're going to see in the next few weeks, instead of a carbon tax, business is going to be saying, let's just make transparent the price that we are really willing to pay to reduce our carbon intensity of this economy. So we can put a price almost to carbon, in the sense that we are going ahead with renewable energy projects that we wouldn't normally have done if we'd just gone for the cheapest cost option. So that's the one end of it. So we're putting a price to carbon on the one end. We're going to try and make that more transparent. But on the other end, we have to try and lower the rollout and implementation price of renewables. And that's where the South African Renewables initiative came in, and it was launched this week. And they launched it with a number of international partners to try and get international funding, low-cost funding, to lower the cost of deploying these technologies. And I think we're going to see another fund that Treasury is looking to deploy as well. So there's a lot of thinking about how do we make this rollout of renewable energy beneficial to the economy, through the jobs it can create and the manufacturing, as well as not changing entirely the cost structure for manufacturing and other enterprises that rely on well-priced or competitively priced power. So it's a difficult circle to square, but it's one that we're trying to apply our mind to, and I think in quite a sophisticated way.
Terence, thank you very much. That is the Second Take show for this week. Thank you for watching, and join us again next time for more news analysis.